Tonight on Insider TV, decision day looms for two top prospects. The very latest on quarterback Jameis Winston and receiver Chris Black. Is Crimson in their future? Or could it be the Scarlet go to Florida State? We'll discuss. Also, summer camp or fall camp or training camp, whatever you want to call it, begins Friday for the Tide. However, news this past week adds more questions than answers for a couple of key positions. Insider Television begins now.
Go inside the Crimson Tide. Tider Insider TV with Rodney Orr and Gary Harris.
And good evening, everybody, and welcome in to Tider Insider TV. Alongside Rodney Orr from TiderInsider.com, I'm Gary Harris. Our program presented every week by Buffalo Rock Bottling Company. Tonight, ice cold Pepsi, and I do mean it is ice cold. Stuck it in the freezer for about 10 minutes before we came out. This week has the potential on the recruiting trail to be a very big one for the Crimson Tide. Good, hopefully. If both guys say no, it could be kind of disappointing. A couple of the top prospects are scheduled to make their college destination known. Let's begin with the in-state guy, Jameis Winston, the quarterback out of Hueytown, 6'4", 195 pounds, one of the MVPs at the recent Elite 11 camp in California. We've known about this young man since the 9th grade. He's been on everybody's radar. Offers from all over the country. Rodney, this is a guy now with the the commitment of Gunnar Kiel to Indiana that is really, really a high priority for Alabama, but also for Florida State. What's the latest?
Well, tomorrow he'll make that announcement, Gary. Alabama, Florida State. I think, you know, the wisdom right now says it'll be Florida State, but there's a long way to signing day.
All right. You're hearing Florida State fairly strongly at this point. There is a long way to signing day, but with Kiel now announcing for Indiana, how big a hit is this for Alabama in its efforts to sign a top-notch quarterback if you can't get the in-state guy, the state's top prospect?
Well, I mean, people are going to think I'm spinning this. Obviously, you know, you've lost two really talented players, Gunnar Kiel deciding to stay in state at Indiana, and then Jameis Winston. If he chooses Florida State, you will have lost those two guys. But at the same time, let's look at what Alabama has right now. You have Phillip Sims and A.J. McCarron, who are as highly regarded, if not more highly regarded, than either Kiel or Winston coming out of high school. So Alabama's doing, you know, set pretty well for the immediate future. When you talk about this recruiting class, they lose both those guys. There are other very good quarterbacks out there. Obviously, some of those have committed to other schools, but I think Alabama's still in the mix with guys like possibly Will Gardner from the state of Georgia, who's committed to Louisville, Grayson Lambert from the state of Georgia, who's not committed to any school, but certainly has had Alabama at the top of his list. And there's a kid out in Texas from Allen, Texas, named Alec Morris, about 6'3", 230 pounds, Gary, a very talented quarterback, committed to Wake Forest a few weeks ago, but Alabama's not necessarily out of that picture.
We'll talk about him more a little bit later on. But in regards to Winston, this time a year ago, we know there are no locks, but everybody assumed that he would choose Alabama. And he may not wind up going to college because he could be a first-round Major League Draft pick in baseball. But how big a factor is the baseball program at Florida State working into this scenario? Because he says if he goes to college, he wants to play both sports.
Well, I think it's a factor, you know, certainly. But I think they've also done an excellent job recruiting Jameis Winston to play football there. Again, I think you make a great point, Gary. The question is, you know, will he end up in 2012, June of 2012 in the Major League Draft? He's certainly a guy that people are now talking about as a top 3, 4, 5 round draft pick.
All right, let's move on to another young man that will make a decision later this week, Chris Black. Now, quarterbacks like to have top flight wide receivers to throw to. Black out of Jacksonville, Florida is one of those guys, no doubt about it. He's got an Alabama hat on there in that picture, but this again looks like an Alabama-Florida State battle. What's the latest on Black?
Well, you know, Gary, we said early in the spring, talking to Chris Black, he was a guy that was leaning to Alabama. Initially, he was leaning to Florida State, been a Florida State fan. But, you know, once he visited here in the spring, he became a huge Alabama fan, has followed Alabama, has named them his favorite throughout the early summer months. Now Florida State, if you listen to people on the internet, made a strong push, and some people were concerned that maybe he was slipping their way to FSU. But I think right now, as we head into the announcement, Alabama's still in front for Chris Black. You know, again, just with Jameis Winston, signing day is a long way away. Florida State's certainly not going to, if he picked Alabama, would not stop recruiting him.
Real quick question for you, Rodney. Will Winston's decision impact Black at all?
Oh, no, I don't think so.
Okay, good stuff. All right, at long last, the Crimson Tide will hit the practice field on Friday. We'll finally actually have some real football. However, there are concerns to address, and that list continues to grow. As Rodney reported on his website last week, a source telling him that running back Eddie LACY injured his pectoral muscle in a weightlifting session last Wednesday. Early indications were that the injury would not require surgery, but LACY's availability as they start camp could be in question. We'll just have to see what happens with him. But at the running back position, Rodney, Alabama's already a little thin. Trent Richardson, LACY, and Jalston Fowler go into fall camp as the only scholarship running backs. Talk about this situation and where will Alabama look to add some depth with the current players that are already here?
Well, you know, that's an interesting situation. And you talk about Eddie LACY. I think he's fine. I think he's going to be fine, obviously. Trent Richardson clearly goes into the season as a Heisman Trophy winner or candidate. And obviously, Jalston Fowler's a guy that showed some promise last year. But after that, you know, where do you turn? Probably Blake Sims, to be honest with you. A very talented kid, played several positions, has been kind of the emergency quarterback since the spring. And they kind of were developing a role for him and maybe as a wildcat type of guy. But again, I think you'll see Blake Sims in the mix when we open practice on Friday.
Okay, and what about Brent Callaway, the freshman?
Well,
if he gets enrolled, would he be a possibility
that
there?
would certainly be another possibility.
Okay, we will start covering that for you on Friday. And Alabama will be down a receiver when the season starts. One of their best, in fact. Senior wideout DARIUS Hanks will miss the first 2 games due to him being redshirted in 2007 after he had played in a game. It's some type of rule. The NCAA's got a lot of them. Hanks, a 5th-year senior, will sit out the Kent State and Penn State games in accordance with NCAA participation rules. As a freshman in 07, he played in the first game of the year against Western Carolina. Didn't play after that, but he'll have to sit out a couple of games. Last season, and 13 games as a starter. He had 32 receptions for 456 yards and 3 touchdowns. Obviously, he's not going to be missed against Kent State, but against Penn State, that could be a hit.
Yep, he's an experienced guy, and you don't have a lot of experience at wide receiver. He and Mays are the 2 most experienced guys coming back.
Yeah, he's going to be out, and of course, Julio Jones has gone to the NFL where he is wowing them at Atlanta Falcons training camp. More on that later in the show, but the immediate question is, even if Hanks does play, where are you going to find? You're not going to find another Julio Jones, we understand that, but where are you going to find some players to help pick up that productivity or the lack thereof with him being gone?
Well, spread the ball around. I think, you know, you'll see them throwing to the backs possibly more this year. And you've got some other guys. Kevin Norwood is a guy that has been kind of in waiting, so to speak. DeAndrew White's a guy that, you know, a lot of people have talked about with his speed. Kenny Bell is another guy with tremendous speed. And, you know, I'm probably leaving some out here, Gary, but they have a lot of young guys to choose from, and it's time for those guys to kind of develop and step up.
And, of course, everybody's going to be interested to see what Deron Carter does.
Absolutely. Don't want to leave him out, the junior college transfer, former Ohio State player. And, you know, again, it'll be very interesting. And he brings something that maybe the other guys don't bring with that size. Yeah. He's 6'4", you know, 210, whatever he is.
Going to be a great competition for those wide receiver slots, especially early in camp with the fact that Hanks won't play the first 2 games. Well, still to come on Titv, Rodney has more recruiting news. We already gave you a little bit of insight on this, but there's a new quarterback prospect, and he's on the Tide's radar. And is a former Auburn commitment now interested in joining Alabama? But up next, Julio Jones achieved star status at Alabama and is already making a name for himself in the National Football League. He is turning heads big time. You'll hear what one of his future Hall of Fame teammates has to say about the rookie receiver next on Tider Insider TV. We'll have phone calls and emails to get to as well. There's the information on the screen to get in touch with us. You're watching the show that takes you inside the Crimson Tide. Tider Insider TV, presented by Buffalo Rock. All right, back on Tider Insider TV now, and some Tide notes, other Tide notes to get to. It looks like Kewan Malone will definitely not return to Alabama. The former receiver, Tide receiver, has reportedly gone home to Memphis and will transfer to play for the hometown Memphis Tigers. Malone had been suspended for a violation of team rules and policy earlier in the summer. And now to Julio Jones. The former Bama receiver continues to wow him at Atlanta Falcons training camp. Veteran All-Pro tight end Tony Gonzalez, who will be in the Hall of Fame one day, tweeted this earlier, quote, "This kid Julio Jones is the real deal. He's the best incoming receiver I've ever played with. Come to think of it, it's not even close," unquote. The Falcons traded 5 draft picks to the Cleveland Browns to acquire the 6th overall choice so they could take Julio. By the way, it's looking right now, it was a good pick. All of Alabama's draft picks have now inked their contracts and are in camp. And Alabama basketball senior JaMychal Green is a finalist for USA Basketball's World University Games roster. He's one of 14 players competing for 12 spots. He's got a good shot. The final roster will be announced before the team departs for China on August 8th, so that's right around the corner. Well, coming up, Rodney's weekly recruiting roundup. Plus, Tider Insider TV will be taking your phone calls at 205-348-WVUA. That's 348-9882. Or you can email us, TITV@WVUATV.com. We'll be back right after this. Rodney and I are really excited about Tider Insider Radio. We've got Tider Insider TV, and we've also got Tider Insider Radio now beginning tomorrow night. These are the stations where you can find us. 97.7 The Zone in Huntsville, 107.5 The Ticket in Montgomery, 105.5 WNSP in Mobile, 6 to 8 p.m. The debut show is tomorrow night, or you can get us on the net, streaming live at www.977thezone.com. Rodney, I'm pretty pumped up. We got a big show planned for tomorrow night, our debut show.
Yeah, looking forward to it, Gary. And again, everybody, as Gary mentioned, not in one of those cities or those markets. You can certainly pick us up anywhere on the internet.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll be adding some more stations in more markets as we get started. Okay, time to talk more recruiting. We've broken down Jameis Winston and Chris Black already. Well, with Winston possibly committing to Florida State, that's what you're hearing anyway. Alabama continues to look for quarterbacks. Gunnar Kill's out, so here's a new name. You mentioned this guy earlier, out of the state of Texas, which is quarterback heaven. Talk about Alec Morris.
Well, he's a very talented kid, Gary, and plays in an offense that allows him to throw the ball, and great decision maker. He camped here at Alabama earlier this summer, and again, he's committed to Wake Forest. That commitment right now is solid, but just keep an eye on him.
All right, we will do that. Of course, you've got to have a big-time quarterback. You've got to have guys to protect him. Another big offensive tackle on Alabama's radar, Vidal Alexander out of Buford, Georgia.
Yeah, very talented. Originally from the state of Louisiana, Gary, so LSU's in there very strongly. In fact, talked to some people from LSU today. They think they lead, but Alabama, Auburn are also very strongly in the mix for Vidal Alexander. They have a commitment, Alabama does, of course, from Dylan Lee, his teammate, and it's expected that Alabama might get a commitment from Kurt Freitag, the tight end on that team.
Wow. Well, another Alexander that most Alabama fans are more familiar with is the great speedy linebacker out of Oxford High School, Quan Alexander.
And he visited Auburn this past weekend. He's kind of been around a little bit. I think still ultimately right now, if pressed to make a guess, I would say Alabama's probably the favorite.
And it looks like the Tide and the Gators are going to fight it out for Jordan Jenkins.
And Gary, he's a very talented kid. Obviously, one of the best players in the state of Georgia, maybe the #1 player in the state of Georgia, one of the top players in the country. A very intelligent young man, and I think right now it appears that he's strongly leaning to Alabama. But that's just my take on it. I know that the Gators are also in there very, very strongly as well.
You know, Rodney, when Alabama signs a junior college guy, they're counting on him to come in and make an impact right away. And Danico Autry has that look. I mean, SEC schools are lining up to try to get the kid out of school.
Yeah, a lot of offers. You know, Gary, we talk about all these stars coming out of high school. Here's a guy that when he came out of high school, he's from a small town in the state of North Carolina. Nobody knew about him. East Mississippi bumped into him, offered him a scholarship. Now he's one of the most highly recruited junior college players in the country. Alabama's been in there very strongly with Danico from the very beginning. But I think right now Mississippi State and Tennessee are probably just ahead of Alabama.
And an interesting prospect out of Pritchard, out of Viger High School, Darius Filion, had been committed to Auburn since the spring, has decommitted. Where does he stand with Alabama? Where does Alabama stand with him? And this is a guy that's got a real motor.
Well, and I think Darius is liked Alabama a lot all along. He did not have an Alabama offer. Reportedly, he got one at a camp earlier this summer that kind of started making him think a little bit. He decommitted from Auburn, and you know, some people are saying that he may commit to Alabama within the next couple of weeks. So, you know, we'll see what happens. But as you mentioned, Gary, he does have a very good motor. He had a great camp here earlier this summer.
And Beniquez Brown out of North Alabama. A lot of people see him as a running back, but Alabama likes him as a big, strong safety.
Yeah, and he went over to Mississippi State's camp a couple of weeks ago, and they were raving about him over there. He's, as you mentioned, a lot of schools in the SEC, Georgia, Mississippi State, Tennessee, Florida. Auburn's in there. Auburn grew up actually a fan of Auburn, but right now Alabama's the team to beat. And Beniquez, whenever he decides to commit, Gary, I think Alabama's going to get him.
All right, good deal. Good update as always. Right now we've got phone callers lined up to talk with you, Rodney. Let's get started with our good buddy Trey in West Blockton. What's going on, Trey?
Hey, how y'all doing?
Good.
Yeah, I know you know, the Gonzalez quotes and all that, which are glowing. When it comes from a 14-year veteran, guy entering his 15th season in the league, and also somebody who's arguably the best ever at their respective positions, you tend to put a lot of stock, you know, whenever somebody like that gives their seal of approval. But I also saw another tweet on there today. Y'all might have as well. It's from the Atlanta Falcons Football Club, or whatever, you know, that was the official account for that. Said, and this is a direct quote: Julio Jones catches everything in all caps, and that quote was topped off with an exclamation point. So, you know, I'm beaming with pride over all this.
Well, Trey, I tell you, you're absolutely right. I mean, when a guy like Tony Gonzalez offers that kind of praise, you take it with not with a grain of salt, but as fact, because he knows what he's talking about. And let's keep this in mind. The one thing, as good as Julio was at Alabama, the one thing he never had here was a good receivers opposite him, but never another really go-to threat. He got the double teams. You know, he got coverage leaning toward his way. With an All-Pro and Roddy White with the Falcons on the other side, he's going to see some man coverage, and I'm really interested to see how he does when they try to cover him with one guy.
Well, you know, and people talking about how he catches everything and how good he is or how talented he is, Gary, what a lot of people overlook about Julio that guys with his ability sometimes don't have, he has a great work ethic.
And a great blocker.
I mean, yeah, unbelievable.
He'll make the run game go, and the Falcons are still one of those teams, even with Matt Ryan at quarterback, they believe in running a football. He's going to have a great career, no doubt about it. All right, let's go to Bessemer and talk with John. John, welcome in.
Gary, what's up, man?
Hey, John.
Roll Tide.
I got you, buddy.
Hey, man, listen, I'm trying to find out who's going to be our field goal kicker this year.
All right, John, they're going to probably go with the same hookup that they went with last year. Shelley handling the extra points and the short field goals, and Cade Foster the kickoffs and the longer field goals. Coach Saban said at media days that it's worked out pretty well for him, so that's probably what we're looking at again.
Probably. And Cade Foster did a great job on kickoffs. Yeah. And by the way, Alabama has probably or possibly the #1 high school kicker in the country, place kicker Adam Griffith from over in Georgia, committed. Yeah. Of course, he comes in next year, but, it'll continue.
All right, let's go to Rainbow City near Gadsden and talk with James. James, how are you?
All right, guys. How y'all guys?
Doing well, James.
Yeah, my question is, I heard something about Barry Sanders' son, if he may come to Alabama to play, and if he does, if he's anything like his daddy, he's going to be something else.
Well, James, he is a very good player, and he's maybe a little bit different, maybe not quite as big as his dad was in terms of his size, his thickness, or whatever, but he's a very talented player, reminds you a little bit of D. Hart in some ways, and Alabama is a team that has been in the mix, and, again, you never count out Oklahoma State, his dad's alma mater, but I know that he's been looking around Alabama, Florida State. He's been real low profile, though, Gary, not talking a lot about what he's going to do. All
right, just another one of those recruiting situations that might go right down to the wire. All right, more of your phone calls and emails in this edition of Tider Insider TV. Return right after this. Well, you notice Roddy and I decked out again tonight with original elephant wear shirts from the Locker Room, located on the University Strip, a Tuscaloosa tradition for 47 years, and the home of the original elephant wear. You can either drop by the store, see the good folks at the Locker Room in person, or visit them online at www.locker-room.biz. You can browse their inventory, and when it comes to original elephant wear, they've got the shirts, ties, pullovers, shorts, pants, all kinds of good stuff, and we love it, and I'm sure you will too. All right, let's go right back to the phones, and first up in this segment is Rick over in Bluff Park. Rick, what's going on?
How you doing today, fellas?
Hey, doing great, Rick.
All right. 4 guys, and I'll make it quick.
Okay.
Travis Blanks from Tallahassee, Dion Ballou, Mississippi Junior College, I believe, Jeremy Liggins, also from Mississippi, and James DeLoach. If you'd comment on those guys, I sure would appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Start with Travis Blanks,
Well,
Rodney.
Rick, I don't know if he's done anything or not. I haven't really checked up on him lately. Jeremy Liggins from Mississippi he's a 6'3", 277-pound quarterback. Very talented kid. Came to camp here, ran a 4.7. That tells you a little bit about what he can do. And Alabama's in the mix, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, LSU. So those are some teams I thought Alabama had been leading. But, Gary, other teams are making it very quickly. James DeLoach, he's a defensive lineman from the state of Georgia, and he's committed to Georgia.
And former Bama signee Dion Ballou.
Dion Ballou, junior college player over in Mississippi. And, Gary, the latest is, according to Dion, is he expects to come back to Alabama, but we'll kind of have to wait and see how that develops.
Okay, thanks for the call, Rick. Let's talk to Tony in Tuscaloosa. Tony, go ahead. Tony, you there? All right, Tony wants to know, why can't Alabama get more out-of-state recruits? Well, Tony, I don't know if you've been following the recruiting in the last few years, but Alabama has been killing it from out of state. I kind of have to disagree with you a little bit on that. They've been going nationwide to recruit.
6 or 7 from the state of Georgia in this
alone.
class alone. Then you're looking at Geno Smith as a guy from the state of Georgia, a cornerback that Alabama still has an excellent shot at. Jordan Jenkins, who we mentioned earlier, from the state of Georgia. I mean, you can look down the roster and find a lot of guys that Nick Saban has brought in from out of state.
Yeah, they've done very well from going out of state. All right, real quick email from Tia. Hey, guys, is there anything to be worried about in what Clay Travis is reporting? Clay Travis, an internet reporter, was the first one to report the story about the pictures that T-Town's men wear. All I can tell you is that with Alabama's recent history with the NCAA, if there's anything there, the NCAA will find it. What do I think about his reporting? Well, he's got a website. It's brand new. He's trying to drive business to it. That's what I think about what he's doing in terms of his reporting. But if there's anything there, you can bet they will find it. So that's all I've got to say about that. All right, we'll be back right after this. And your chance to get a look at the Alabama 2011 Crimson Tide football team comes on Sunday, the annual Fan Day, and boy, it's a big, big day. Bryant-Denny Stadium, 2:30 to 4:30 open practice. You see when the gates open, autographs following practice on the field. Now, you don't have to watch the practice. You can stay in line to try to get up close and be waiting for them when they get to the tables to start signing. But I do encourage you to get there and try to get your place in line. All right, we'll be there too, covering it for you. And right now, we're getting set to go to dinner. The Pottery Grill is going to host us tonight over in Northport. I'd like to see you there. Don't forget, if you missed any of tonight's show, there's one place you can catch it anytime, WVUATV.com. So for Rodney Orr, our producer John Huddleston, and our entire WVUA TV and Tider Insider TV crew, I'm Gary Harris. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again next week. Don't forget about our radio show tomorrow night.